Folks, we're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry, I'm off camera tonight. As we're setting up the tech, this seemed to work best for the presentation. Can folks hear me okay? Can you just do a little something in the chat if you can hear me? Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay. So folks, this is part two in our Prepare to Soar series, and we're doing them in the order, right? So we are talking opportunities tonight. And the audience, first of all, if you can put in the chat, I was given a little prompt, how you heard about this series or this workshop. Was it you saw our marketing, you got an email, you were looking in Handshake, your friend told you about it, a faculty member told you about it, a staff member, anything like that. We're just trying to see like how people are hearing about things. So if you could just enter that in the chat, now that would be great. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, so I'm Brian Rowe. I'm Director of Experiential Education in the AU Career Center. So one of the three career centers that work with students on main campus. And I have been at AU for about 10 years, but I've worked with experiential learning, internships, and then in career centers really for a long time. So I'm happy to present to you tonight. We're going to take a look at opportunities for graduating students. And by that, I mean sort of where can you possibly go? What can you do? And then some resources as you're sort of selecting and figuring that out. Okay. And we are going to, oops. So again, that's me. We should be wrapped up by about 6:55 tonight. So if not a little bit earlier, but we will stick to the schedule. So a little bit about some upcoming events, right? So please look at our website. We've got tabs for workshops, networking events, all right on our web page, right? So please take a look at that. Just a little handful of things that are coming up soon, okay? And then remember the big event is on the March 27th from 1 to 4, the spring job and internship fair, okay? All right. Okay, here we go. This is me. I'm off camera right now. Let's see. Okay. So really, opportunities, right? So you have options and opportunities after graduation. I know for a lot of you that means employment. I absolutely get it. Totally great. But that can be, or some of you may want to do more experiential learning sort of afterwards, or maybe in an interim period between grad school. Some of you are going to graduate school like sooner rather than later, maybe after a year or two. There's so many options there. But we'll take a look at, what these options are, what these opportunities are for you after graduation, which sometimes is like, oh, wow, there's a lot of other things I can do. Please always remember, we're going to take a look at a lot of information tonight. Please remember that there are career advisors for you to talk to. If you're a COGOD student, COGOD has the Office of Career Engagement. If you're SIS, junior, senior, or grad student, you have the Office of Career Development and SIS. And then pretty much everybody else, right, is going to meet with our big office, the AU Career Center. We have teams of career advisors that focus on career areas and majors, academics for the different schools, right? So I manage both the School of Public Affairs team and also the School of Communication team. So those are currently my two teams, okay? And again, there's going to be a lot of, you're going to do reflection. We're not going to do sharing of that, but think about sort of what brought you here. Maybe it's, oh my gosh, I'm graduating soon and I really need to get this kind of sorted and provide myself a structure. Fantastic. And then think, what is the information you as an individual need for the next steps? And that will be different for each of you, right? So there may be someone in the room right now who's saying, I know exactly what I want to do, and I need very pinpoint information about how to to get there, or I know how to get there, but I need, this piece of information and maybe some supplemental information over here. You could be very focused. Other folks are like, I still need to establish for myself my interests, my values as they relate to work, my strengths. There are ways that we can help with that. Always remember you have career advisors to talk to. There will be other workshops, info sessions. People learn and sort of absorb in different ways, and we try to provide as many of those ways as possible. But think about the information you need, right? Is it job listings? Is it, I actually need to help with finalizing a career direction? I need help clarifying what skills do I need for a certain career area? I want to move to a certain place. Like there are a lot of individual sort of needs that you'll have, and that sort of reflection about sort of getting that information down is good, right? So, okay. When it comes to employment, right? So many of you, a lot of you, most of you, as you're graduating, are going to be looking for work, right? So, and for career development folks, people in the career center, what we want to see is you make this very well-informed decision that puts you into your first career, which will not be your last career, but your first career after graduation that is either very related to what you studied or uses a lot of the skills in a transferable skills kind of way that you picked up from your experiences at AU, related to AU and outside of AU, right? We want to see you kind of mesh well with that first job, right? So what do employers look for, right? And NACE, National Association of Colleges and Employers, is a big national level, kind of international actually, organization, and the membership is career centers, and then also employers, and these tend to be larger employers, okay? But the career folks in that org query the employers, right? What skills are you looking for? And this list has evolved over the last few years, and it may evolve further, and things may change, right? And there may be more nuance, but right now, these are the top 8 skills that employers are looking for. So these areas in some level and way, shape, and form, the individual levels of these might fluctuate with employers, specific employers. But here are the sort of top 8 career competencies that folks are looking for, right? We don't have rankings for these, but I would say communication and teamwork are usually the top 2. No matter what, if you're in a tech-related field, if you're in a education field, if you're in, anything really, they need you to be able to communicate effectively, both verbally and in writing, right? And then teamwork. You can be so skilled and so capable and knowledgeable, but if you can't work as part of an effective team, then that lessens your ability, right, to impact positively the organization. So career self-development. You'll all get this question. So how does this job fit into your, career path? Or, why this job, right? Any kind of question like that in an interview is really, they're kind of assessing your career management skills, your self-development skills. They want to know that you've thought through, like, this is a good job for me. I'm really motivated and interested in it. This is what I'd like to learn and develop and grow, in the position. This is what I can contribute. That kind of self-analysis with the job lets them go, oh, wow, this is a really kind of informed decision this candidate is making coming here, right? Obviously, most of us need to work, to make money, to pay bills, to live life, all of that, right? That's sort of the given. But why this particular job, right? And it can be this field, why this organization, be prepared for that, and then why this specific job. That's an example of career development, right? Tech, some jobs are really all tech, right? Software skills, hardware skills, whatever it is. There may be these essential items tech-wise that you need to be able to use. Others, not so much, or much, much smaller. Equity and inclusion, this would also include for the international students in the room or for the US students who have really incorporated a global outlook, global competencies. Global competencies are included in equity and inclusion. If you go to NACE's website, you'll see like write-ups on these. And that one, that again, some employers, it's really essential. They want employees who've lived abroad, right? They want employees that can operate both in a communication sense through language and other cultures, and then also, are familiar sort of with business practice, for instance, in different cultures. So these are the 8. And again, you can look up NACE career competencies. We have actually drop downs on our website, the AUCC website, about this. But when you're thinking, gosh, what are the skills that everybody wants, right? Some level of these. I'd also say critical thinking. We're seeing that a lot from employers. Can you, if you were presented with a problem at work, can you kind of assess it? And that doesn't mean you have to fix it 100% by yourself, but as a new employee, can you identify issues and maybe suggest solutions or select information that can help with solutions? That is something I think that employers we're seeing more and more of. So those are, again, this is across the board. Now, for those of you interested in grad school, think about this, right? These can also apply for, as you're applying to graduate school. They certainly want to see professionalism in your application. You're putting your best foot forward. Leadership, they often value leadership, definitely critical thinking, which you're getting in courses, and as you're writing and analyzing, you're getting that. So, and also career and self-development. Grad schools want to see that you're making a very informed choice about this graduate program, how it will enhance my life, my professional development moving forward. They want informed, they want to see that you're making informed choices. Okay. Now, for those of you, again, we're taking the big view of this, right? As you determine and decide what the opportunities you're going to pursue, again, think about the interest, timing, budget, skills, and location, right? So if you need to be or really want to be in a certain location, right, that is going to kind of focus really your opportunities, right? If there's a career field. So let's say, when I would talk to folks who live outside of DC, this area, maybe they're in other parts of the country and they're really interested in careers in international affairs. This is the center, really, maybe DC, New York, a little bit on the West Coast that maybe looks to Asia, for instance. There are sort of places where it makes more sense for certain industries, right? So when I'm working with SOC students who are film and media, right, if they really want to work in the entertainment industry, what are the 2 places where someone in SOC, where you're going to find the most work for a student interested in film, for instance? There's 2 locations, and then maybe a few others that are kind of really coming up and developing. But it's good to know how the location, impacts your opportunities. Okay. Certainly for everything, budget, how much will what is the cost? That could be the cost in time, the cost in and money, certainly. But think about, we can all have this sort of goal. Think about how this works as well. And then again, timing and interest, right? So is there an industry, is there a job that focuses on your specific interest? And I hope at some level, yes, right? Will we all be paid, or will we all work in an area that's our super dream? Maybe not, but can you also, those sort of things that give you real pleasure, can they also be incorporated into your life in other ways, right? Volunteerism, hobbies, there are ways. The job is not the be all end all. You're a whole person, but these are considerations for moving forward, right? So let's focus for a bit on the job and internship search, which I think, there probably a lot of you in the room are graduating soon. There may be others that want to kind of take this for internships. really the two are sort of interchangeable for what we're looking at right now. If I feel there's a difference, the main difference is for an internship, the intern employer is really looking for someone who wants to learn a lot and can contribute, right? That is a good internship is structured that way. For a job, certainly you're going to learn, right? And grow in the position, but really you need to lead with like, here's how I can contribute. Here's why I think I'm a very good match for this role and this organization, right? So, but okay. So when you're looking for jobs, right? So obviously there's sort of multiple places where you can look. Some of these are very kind of 30,000 feet, right? So really big picture, right? We have on our website career guides by majors. That is, I would say those are sort of very foundational. You might absorb that very quickly, right? So we have ideas about where people with individual majors ending up career-wise, okay? ONET is something the federal government uses to classify job positions, right? And they code them, which then actually matches these codes from an assessment, a career assessment that we work with, called the Strong Interest Inventory. And the strong is for folks who are like, I want feedback. I want to feedback on what my interests are. I want an instrument to kind of help me clarify that. I'm pretty sure, but I'd like to get that. That is called the Strong Interest Inventory. It will give you a 3-letter code, and then they've coded like, I don't know, so many jobs, thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, if not more jobs. And again, that is to say many people who work in this field tend to have this response to the Strong Interest Inventory, okay? Obviously, I hope you know this, handshake job postings, right? Whenever an employer is like, I have jobs I want, or internships I want AU students to see, Handshake, right? That is the premier place. Handshake is a platform used across the country. Many of your friends at different universities are also going to have Handshake instances at their universities. This is a way for, you're a new professional, you're either coming out of an undergraduate degree or a graduate degree. And, if employers have positions that are appropriate for those populations, Handshake's fantastic because, again, they're able to get those in front of you, right? So that's Handshake. Of course, in addition, you're RSVPing for events, for instance. Handshake is hosting their virtual job fair platform is hosting the job fair at the end of March. So but the listings there are pretty continuously being updated. So any employer says, I've got a great internship I want AU students to see, we have an introduction for them on Handshake. They can then say, oh, I want AU students to see it. I want NYU students to see it. I want, wherever, they'd like that to be there. There are websites too, if you want to look at job listings, and this is useful too in deciding sort of in refining your direction, right? Read job descriptions. If something sounds really fascinating, really interesting to you, then think about that, right? Is that something that you want to pursue? Maybe you read it and you go, this sounds amazing, but it says I have to have 5 to 8 years experience. So keep it in mind, right? Look, what are the skills they're looking for? Are these things you can build up to? If you're looking for a job, this is going to be maybe your first job, maybe, after school, this may be your first job. It's definitely not your last job. Just like I said, this will be your first career after AU. It won't be your last. Data now is showing that people sort of moving through the job markets have between 4 and 7 careers. So these are like completely separate, right? My father had worked for the same company for almost all of his professional life. Those days are that's unusual, pretty unusual now. So, and again, your first career and your second career may have significant overlap, but then your third and fourth, the fourth and the first may not have very much overlap at all, except with those transferable career competencies that we looked at earlier. Okay. Indeed is a website, for instance, where it's an aggregator, so there's a lot of jobs on there. Certainly, look at these job listings, read them. What are they asking for? Are you prepared? Do you feel like you're a good match for that? And if you're not sure, you can always bring job listings to a career advising appointment and say, let's help me analyze this. This is what I think, right? Using critical thinking skills. Am I heading in the right direction? We absolutely happy to do things like that. CC resources, Career Center resources. So based on your team, based on your school, COGOD office will have very sort of business focused resources, right? The Office of Career Development and SIS, obviously, you know what their focus will be, right? My office is, because again, there are more, and there are these different teams. Each of our teams has resources. I work quite a bit with the SPA students. We've got these great Canvas sites. If I have a student that says, Brian, I want to get involved in health policy employers, like who's doing that? We've got these lists, like 40 or 50 kind of career areas. And here's who's doing that sort of thing in the DC area, right? And by the way, if you're from another school and you're like, hey, health policy, or I'm interested in policy careers, we're of course going to share that with you, right? So we're very collegial about that. We're happy if you're interested in policy careers. You don't need to be an SPA student. Everybody can help you with that, right? So very few majors track directly to very specific jobs. There's a few. If you want to be a chemist, you know what your major is going to be, right? Education, it's very helpful to have an education degree. That's the most direct path, right? So, but again, for a lot of our majors, there's no specific this job for that major, right? It's broader than that, which is great for you in the long run, but I know it can be like you have to figure it out now, right? So those are the other resources. By school, there'll be different resources. Okay, and again, how to look. We kind of talked about the online piece. You've heard Career Center folks talk about networks, right? This can be, we help with this. This is one of our big goals in career services, is providing these bridge experiences to connect you. AU's got fantastic alumni that are very interested in kind of giving back, connecting students, talking to students. If you did a job search that was just solely applying online versus one that was just solely through networks, through having informational interviews, making connections like that, getting referrals to maybe openings by people in your network. If you went one or the other, the network option would have a much, much higher rate of return, right? On interviews and probably on job offers, right? You know what? I'm not saying do one or the other, do both, but understand, you're sending in applications online, so are a lot of people. And as someone who hires, I hire in the Career Center, right? I can get 150 applications for a career advisor position, and probably there will be, out of 150, maybe 12 will be serious candidates, and I can still get that 12 down to like 4, right? With a little bit of help from my committee. So, and that vast majority, they're not tailoring their resume at all. They're sending a cookie cutter resume to very different positions, right? I'm talking radically different positions. I can tell I'm getting the same resume as someone who's hiring an admin assistant or a project manager. They're not doing any kind of tailoring. And often with the cover letter, I'm getting a cookie cutter cover letter. Not great, right? I'm also getting frequent mistakes. And so this is, remember, imagine for a career advisor position. So you're going to work with AU students on their career advancement, and you're making mistakes in your cover letter. Big mistakes, like you're addressing it to not me, or you're saying, I'm super excited to be a career advisor at George Mason University, right? I've gotten cover letters like that, and those immediately I discount, right? I'm not looking any further. So again, with the online piece, yes, you're going to apply to a lot of them, but please try to tailor, fine tune. It doesn't mean rewriting your resume every time, but fine tune things, and the career advisors can help with that. The networking piece, absolutely. If I had you in a room, I would ask how many of you have heard of Alumni Fire. So if you Google Alumni Fire, one word, Alumni Fire and American University, it's going to pull up our instance, right? So Alumni Fire is a way where alums from AU can say either I want to network and interact with other alums, or I'm happy to provide information to students about my career field, or maybe multiple career fields, right? If I've had multiple careers already. The site is very structured, so I might say, I'm willing to talk to 5 AU community members a month, and I'm willing to have a informational interview. I'm willing to discuss trends in the field. It's very specific what you'll see on there. And I know there's a little over 5,000 members of the AU community on there. If you're a graduate student, double check Alumni Fire. They may have communities for your undergraduate institution on there as well, and utilize both. Utilize all resources available to you, both at graduate and undergraduate, whatever works best, you do it. I mentioned these informational interviews a few times. Huge fan of these. This is you're sitting down with somebody like an alum, but doesn't have to be an alum, and saying, you're doing this work that I find really fascinating and interesting. And I looked at your background. Maybe, your bachelor's degree was the same as mine. Can we talk about how you got to where you are, what you think someone now coming into the field needs to do as far as training, skills, what is the best path for me? Where do you see the field going? All of that is an informational interview. These can be 30 minutes, maybe an hour. Now with online, we can do them with people across the country, right? And we set these up, well, depending on sort of your academic program, your school, sometimes they'll have these sort of opportunities. So we've done this in SPA, also SOC. I know SIS has, sometimes it may be called more of a mentor program, right? So, but there are ways, those would be kind of, you may have multiple informational interviews with someone and establish those professional connections. Think broad about your networks. It can be family, it can be friends of family, it can be classmates, it can be former classmates, it can be alumni, people you meet at the job fair, you can connect with, absolutely at all the networking events that the career centers are putting on. So we really do want to help you build up, but think very broadly. Humans are very good about establishing connections and relationships, right? This is one of our successes as a species. You already know how to do this. It's just sort of intentionally directing it toward maybe a professional focus. Okay. And again, here are things to consider, right? Interest, timing, budget, skills, and location. These all factor in. Okay. I do want to take a question. Lucia, thank you very much for your question for international students. So yes, one of the things, okay, for international students, looking at the Washington, D.C. area, this is an area of the U.S. that is very sort of maybe international and global in its focus. That's the plus. So you have employers who are rather, knowledgeable, or, there are many international folks working in the DC area. The sort of challenge for international folks is the big federal sector jobs are not available to international students for the most part. There are these very specific instances where that is not the case. One that comes to mind is Voice of America, right? So, utilizing language skills, that's a news and information agency of the federal government, right? So, but it is the federal, by and large, the federal sector employers, which in DC is a big chunk, right, are not available to non-citizens, right? So that can be a big challenge. So what do you, then again, that would be, as you look at your opportunities, right, you focus in on nonprofits, for-profits. If you'd like to stay in the DC area, if you'd like to go elsewhere, obviously, the federal sector in different cities is much smaller than in Washington. So, you certainly can stay. And again, those pluses of having this very big international community, global organizations, international organizations have a big presence here, right? Those are the pluses, and then again, the challenges. And you can take a look at these, right, for different locations or different fields, and then measure that. So, but thank you for bringing that up. So something that folks sometimes consider, but I do want to bring up, are fellowships, right? So fellowships are finite experiences. Many of these are international in focus, but not all. And these tend to be 1 or 2 years in length, and they provide sort of this very sort of curated experience in a specific field, right? So, and if you look up the National Scholarship Directory, you'll see that. So scholarship in this way is not meaning like money for school, for instance. Although it can be a part of it is money for graduate school or money. There's sort of money, but it isn't usually tied to like you getting a very specific degree. But so fellowship is kind of a nicer way to put it. Many of you may have heard of the Fulbright, right? Which either you're going to do research in another country or you're teaching English in another country, right? AU is a top Fulbright producer, so we have within the US, AU always is on this list of sort of top Fulbrights, but there are so many other fellowships. They focus on either different parts of the world or different issues or topical areas. So definitely, you may say, you know what, I want to go to grad school in a few years. This is maybe 2, right? This is, this would be one of those really career enhancing and also just wonderful experiences that to do kind of maybe before further school, or maybe you just want to do it because it's like this good 2 years experience that you can have before your next career area or career adventure. So and again, sort of the same as looking for jobs and internships. Where do you find these fellowships, right? So definitely online through something like the Scholarship Directory. We have part of the Career Center is the Office of Merit Awards, right? Look within our Career Center website, Office of Merit Awards, OMA for short. They have a directory of fellowships and scholarships like that. So you'll see that information. That's a little bit of an unusual configuration too. Sometimes you see the Office of Merit Awards embedded in like honors programs. Sometimes it's completely separate, but we see it as like really integral to sort of your career development. So, and again, there's the list, right, of factors to consider. So grad school, we do grad school advising. Now, what career centers tend to do is focus on the professional and job and career application of your graduate degrees, right? So what we don't do in the career center is tell you like, oh, this master's in history is the best one, right? You can look up rankings, right, of those. And if you want to know like, oh, I want to be a public affairs faculty member, for instance, or I want just really advanced knowledge in a certain field, talk to your current faculty. They're going to have a pretty good idea of maybe which graduate programs. Maybe there's a specific emphasis you'd like from your master's program, right? And this is also true of PhDs if you're going that route. talk to your faculty. They're in the know because this is their profession. The Career Center is happy to talk to you about, you know, what is the career implication of me getting these graduate degrees, right? So we do that sort of advising for graduate school. So it's a combination, I would say, of your faculty and then us, right, in the career centers. There are graduate school fairs every year in DC. It's usually a consortium of the schools come together and one school will host it, right? And then you get like 150 graduate schools kind of showing, you know, like what they have. Obviously, there's recruiting of graduate schools. And I will let you know now is a good time. Like if you want to go to graduate school, I all across the country, we're seeing a dip in students going to graduate school. That usually is reflected by the economy. The economy is still adding jobs. The US is still adding, you know, jobs. And I think people are really sensitive to cost, right? So, you know, now is a good time if you have the budget or if talk to them about scholarships, right? You know, or financial aid, those will come to graduate students. You know, now is the time to take a look. The graduate schools are very eager right now. And again, I think when it comes to graduate programs, so if someone wants to go to grad school in international affairs, international relations, international, you know, that where would I recommend as far as an industry center for them to go to school? DC, right? Also New York is very good. But you know, you will find international programs elsewhere. They tend to build maybe pipelines or they have support mechanisms to these big centers. But you think about if you have an industry focus, look at the graduate schools in that area. You know, if LA has the industry that you're interested in, you're going to see a lot of really good graduate programs there that are tied to industry, right? So think about that. And also, you'll find tons of information online. Talk to folks. Again, those informational interviews, if you're hearing that there's this grad degree that's really hot in the industry of your interest, that's maybe the one to focus on, right? So organizing yourself, right? This can be really overwhelming no matter what your next opportunity is. Think about what works best for you in organizing. Even if some of us thrive with lots of organization, and I would say go for it, absolutely. Others, it's more of a means to an end or keeps us from getting stressed. Great, you know. But really think about if you're applying to jobs, if you're applying to grad schools, if you're looking at fellowships, create some kind of organization system. So even sometimes when you're like, I've done a lot. What does a lot mean? Oh, I've done this many, you know, applications, for instance. With positions, sometimes you've got so many job apps out, then all of a sudden you get a call that or an email, they want to set up an interview. Just go back and go, okay, yeah, this is what I applied to. It could be a little tough to just keep that all in your head. Think about, so some people do better saying, all right, all day Saturday, I'm going to apply to grad schools, right? Others are like, I'd rather do like an hour a night. You know, think about what works best for you in doing this, right? It takes time, it takes energy, pace yourself. We want to, but understand that, you know, especially for jobs, you're going to be applying for a lot of jobs. As you move through your careers, you'll have to apply to fewer and fewer. You'll build, you know, a knowledge base within a field, for instance, and then, you know, you'll have to apply to fewer and fewer, and the result will be more job offers. But it is a time now, you know, for this, keep track. You're going to be applying to a lot. Keep applying, right? Depending on your field, depending on your location, depending on the timing, these all come into it. It can be, you know, you put your blood, sweat, and tears and all of your energy into some of these applications, and sometimes you either get a negative result or you hear nothing, and that just acknowledge that can be frustrating. You're not alone in that, absolutely. Um, and commiserate with others. It absolutely is. It's not easy, but we've got great data. AU students who graduate are getting lots of jobs. Go to We Know Success, American University, and you can look by major the last 3 years. So the percents that are coming up, the salaries that are coming up, that's the last three graduating classes. Okay. Um, if there's some brand new majors and there's not enough, you won't get a result, right? But We Know Success. Take a look, and you'll even see where some people from with your academic degree have gone, right? You'll see not a complete list of employers, but quite a lot of employers. Okay. Online tools, again, this is things that you can access. Okay, there at the bottom is that alumni fire that I was talking about. Big interview, more and more first round interviews, and not everybody does like 2 and 3, especially for entry level position. But you may have there may be no people involved in your first interview. It may be a recording. I've done that in the Career Center where I've proposed questions and then HR sends them a link and they record their answers, right? Nobody's super great at this because we don't do it all the time, right? But if you use something like Big Interview, which is located, go to Handshake, click on Career Center, and then click on Resources, right? So Handshake, click on Career Center, click on Resources. Big Interview can help you do that. Practice. I know it's kind of weird looking at yourself, answering questions. It's going to track how many times you say right? The feedback is really good and you'll be so much better at that. It's also just a way to practice interviewing if you're nervous. We also have mock interviews. If you select and Handshake a mock interview, that's an hour long. Send us your resume and the job that you're interested in, that you're going to apply to or have applied to, and we'll craft a mock interview. For international students and for US domestic students, going global. This has career guides by country, sometimes by city. For international students, it has a H-1B visa database. What that is these companies, if you're interested after your OPT, for instance, right? And you'd like to stay in the US longer, H-1B visas. This is a database of companies and organizations that have in the past sponsored for H-1B visas. It doesn't mean they will, it doesn't mean they always will, but the track is like these have done it, right? For US students wanting to go abroad, again, you'll see country guides, lots of information about sort of the professional world in that country, how interviewing works, resources, and what you could do abroad. Okay. LinkedIn Learning. This is something where you can take courses online, right? Like certificates and things like that. We get this through the library, the AU library. So you have access to this massive database of, do you want to brush up your Excel skills? Do you want to make yourself a really conversant user in Excel, for instance? That would be courses that you could take. Okay. And then obviously take a look in Handshake. I mentioned how Big Interview and Going Global are both in that. Click Career Center, click Resources, and you'll see Big Interview and Going Global. There are other resources in there as well. So, okay. All right. Questions. All right. Let's see. I think we'll do questions now. If you have questions, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Okay. So we can have a conversation. Who's got questions? Are there any questions? All right, folks. Well, if there are no questions, actually, let's see. I think we have, um, just again, those upcoming workshops. So how to network before the networking event on Tuesday. We have a networking event on Tuesday. And then law school, we have programming for those of you who are considering law school up through like, I'm applying to law school, both with the Career Center and school-based as well. So if you have no questions, then we are all done for the evening. All right. Oh, do I see a question just popped in? Let me take a look here. Oh, okay. This is a question. Do I have access to my email, your AU email after graduation? I think for a certain amount of time you do. If you're thinking, with Handshake, for instance, you can, because that's your login, you can, for instance, just call the Career Center and say, I'd like to switch my, my Handshake email from the AU address to like, my other email. We do that for alumni all the time. But that is a great question. I'm not sure. I think it doesn't go right away. After a certain time, months, year or something, I think they can transition you to an alumni email address. But that is something that we'll have to check on. But yeah, but you can certainly switch that in Handshake to another email. That way you'll get the notifications and everything to another email address. And then just for everybody, we had a question that Delia answered. Thank you. About the spring job and internship fair, have guest organizations from outside DC. So Delia's answer is spot on. I'd say most are focused in the DC area. Now, because the fair this time, because Bender Arena is being renovated, right? We're doing a virtual fair. You may see more out of DC employers on the list. So that's an opportunity for folks outside of the DMV to join us. So there's always some, and New York would be, probably the largest grouping outside of DC, but probably more this time because it's a virtual fair. So. All right, folks, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining. Again, get an appointment with your career advisor, come as soon as you can, and then you may have a series of them. Get in, will help you if you need focus in a certain area, clarification on skills, interests, values, really specific information, on a career area or connections with that, like which organizations are doing that kind of work, utilizing Alumni Fire to make those connections. Please come see us. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good night.